Sorry to Bother You was a fantastic movie. It showed how the workers make the profits, how slavery and devaluing workers is rational and natural from a capitalist perspective. It shows how to talk to fellow workers in a way that makes them want to collectively bargain for better pay. Its phrase, stick to the script, not only refers to the script of selling and being programmed to do a job, but also social scripts of what black and white and employees and employers are supposed to do. It also shows how capital commodifies revolution to make it lose its teeth and less effective, and then just uses the revolution and the bargaining in order to make more money and to make more of a distraction in the world. And it uncovers how white voice is a framing device for code switching between people, but also how no one has actually attained a perspective that white voice should ideally come from. But all these topics have been covered by other YouTubers for at least a half an hour each. Peter Coffin, Just Right, Maggie May Fish, Infonaut, Literal Garbage, and Peter Coffin again. What is there to say to take out from this movie? Well, how did all this stuff get into this movie? How do you write an hour-and-a-half video that spawns at least 4 hours of discussion and dissection? How does someone jam-pack so much meaning into a movie? How did Boots Riley find all of the time to naturally comment on these aspects of capitalism? So I guess what I'm saying is, how do you write Sorry to Bother You? Why? I don't know. Why would you want to write a big multifaceted world with lots of things to say that makes lots of people want to analyze and understand it, and also helps people understand the system that we're currently in? Seems like some pretty good whys there. I feel like Sorry to Bother You is part of a bigger world, where Squeeze is out there trying to organize new unions and finding new crappy jobs to then make the workers rise up and fight together for. Detroit is out there making art, trying to get attention. Aspects of art and reality and capitalism, where they're taking advantage of people in Africa and using exploitive and explicit means to do so. These are complex characters and strong storytelling in a complex world. You could put a lot of stories in Sorry to Bother You. I wouldn't be surprised if I can easily imagine a Sorry to Bother You 1, 2, 3, several more movies, or even more movies just in the Sorry to Bother You universe, where this magical realism is used to express multiple ways to rebel. Though Sorry to Bother You alone is a masterclass in all of these things, it's hard to see how one can do better. But the best sequels have something more to say on the subject, and there's lots to say about workers' rights. Sorry to Bother You's world is amazing. There aren't any generic nothings in the background. A lot of things have meaning and tie into the theme. You see Detroit's and other activists like Detroit's graffiti in the background of the whole movie. Every poster, every television show, every shop ties in to somewhere later, and it says something overall about the world and the way things are. It is our world heightened with the magical realism. Sorry to Bother You is also a great piece of work to emulate because it brings up important ideas. Problems that need to change. Problems that maybe have been old and we have a carryover from older systems, but problems that need to be changed all the same. Every political party exists because there are common problems and commonalities that they can band together for with their beliefs to change. Donald Trump didn't run on a ticket of everything's fine. He said, people are hurting. People are hurting. Jobs are hurting, and I'm going to make it better. I'm going to do something different because I'm not one of the regular ones. But then he got in and did the same thing that every other Republican has done forever, except more and worse. No, I don't think I want to draw those lines so soon in this. Anyone can write Sorry to Bother You. It doesn't matter what political side you're on. It kind of does, though. Which brings up a good question in my mind also that you can put in your little brain box is, do you have to be one political way or another to write something like Sorry to Bother You? That in your brain pocket. And you notice them too. If it's homeless people just existing around parks and public libraries, if it's people complaining about their jobs or how they can't afford rent or how they're broke this week, the high unemployment rate or the rate of people that are underemployed with their college degrees, there's the existence and proliferation of predatory industries like loan sharks or payday loans. People are hurting, my beloved geese. So maybe the why isn't important. Is that why enough for you? It was why enough when you clicked on the video? Okay, how? It's how time. How do you do these? Writing a story is hard enough. How do you also interject social commentary? Does it have to be injected? Is this how the HJWs win? Well, part of knowing how is recognizing that there's a tradition in literature of pointing out these problems and dramatizing them and bringing them to the attention of others. A Christmas Carol might seem to several viewers as just like a nice story about why being nice to people is good. But at the time, it was biting social commentary about a rising system of capitalism. It critiques several thoughts of the day about how it's wrong and how ideas of overpopulation are super dumb. Through stories of the past, we can understand how ideas have shaped until now. This world does not exist in a bubble, and it is not natural. Our economic system is not natural or how things were always done. Several people have looked back in time and projected our ideas of money and currency onto the past, but currency is a fairly recent occurrence and hasn't been tracked for systems for thousands of years of our existence. It's only a recent event that people have even been accounting. Roads, laws, family structure, traditions, economic systems, the internet, philosophy, all had to be made by people. Landscape looked completely different even 100 years ago. Even 50 years ago, a lot of the major road systems in America were made. And in Europe, a lot of them were remade after World War II. There was once nothing that looked like it would today. You couldn't go very far without being swamped with tall grass and trees. It took thousands of years before we can have the kind of technology that made it so we can cross rivers, build roads, move mountains, make conditions livable, fill in freaking swamps. Florida used to be a giant swamp until we filled a bunch of it in. Florida's still kind of a giant swamp. Making the world that we know now, where houses dot everywhere, there's farms, where you can look from... If you Google Earth, down in any country you see lots of little lines and that's where farms are. Those only exist because workers made them. Workers on machines spending hours to toil to literally create the world we now inhabit. So not only should you have a rough understanding of the origin of everything, but you should also have an understanding of the origin of our society and our culture. Or more accurately, cultures, because we have thousands of different cultures. There are different cultures in different states, in the city, in the country. Different parts of the country are not the same. So often when people talk about rural communities, they present it like it's a monolith. Like they're all the same, like white people doing stuff, and that is nuts, because that is not at all accurate. Rural communities are different all over. They are different nationalities, they're informed by different traditions, they have different festivals. A lot of them are by the water, and not every water, fish, oyster festival is the same. They have different related and nearby businesses. There are different accents wherever you go. I was the home of 10 different crazy accents, and I myself have adapted to 2 of them because I lived in Michigan and then went in the middle of the state and now over in the west side of the state. So my accent is all over the place. What is this accent? I do not know! And the best part is you don't need to know about all of it. To make interesting and realistic people, you just need to dive into a couple of those. Though it's probably best if it's a diverse couple, but knowing a little bit about folk from the country is a great idea, especially the country near you. You might think, where would I know that? Well, you have cousins. You have cousins that don't live in a city. Reach out if you don't actually live in a rural community yourself. And if you do live in a rural community, reach out and try to listen to other rural communities. Go to their festivals. It's life. That's a lot of living I'm suggesting you do. You need to have a life to write. Good. You can learn a little bit from media, but it's better to learn from people. That way it's more genuine and there's not a copy of a copy syndrome that goes on. But one neat story about learning things from media is in the show Veronica Mars. Early in season 1, there's a character who calls his girlfriend Mama or Mommy, on the phone, hey mommy, I like those legs. And I watched that and I thought oh, that's weird. Is that a thing? And I had to Google a bunch of things and talk to a bunch of people till I learned that it kind of is a thing. Some people do it. I've noticed in some media sense. But the weirdest thing I've noticed in some media sense is in the Rankin-Bass Rudolph, Santa Claus calls his wife Mama, which they don't have kids. So that's weird, right? Like, canonically, they don't have children. That's like the big thing. Santa Claus doesn't have children, so he gives to everyone. That doesn't have anything to do with anything. Just, you know, culture's different. The kind of swearing people do, what they call their significant others, all can feed into how a character exists in the world. And you do have to watch out for ham-handed social parody for this kind of thing. Like, that's why don't rely on things you've seen in media, because it's probably racist, and just doing things that you've seen in media builds on that misinterpretation of that culture. And not only culture, but every specific family is different. Think about staying at other people's homes when you were a kid. Other families had different family dynamics. No one worked quite like your family worked. And that can inform characters too, in how they interact at home with the people they know. Like, they don't just all fight with their brother or sister. Some of them get along, some of them ignore each other, some of them just don't care to be around each other. Some are antagonistic, and then some are all of those things, all at once, effortlessly. What all this boils down to is observation and listening. I'm sorry if I put too many S's on things. I've been watching Letterkenny, and I think it's a bad influence on me. Just when you go out to a restaurant, when you go to a festival, when you're sitting around in public, in a cramped space, too close to other people, listen to them. Eavesdrop. Listen to the conversations around you. Don't steal them word for word or put in weird personal details, but do believe them and listen to them, especially when they're talking to you to your face. This plays into if someone's complaining about traffic or their day or something that happened, be on their side and don't be a devil's advocate and be like, oh, maybe the other person was driving well and you were a bad driver. That is rude, and you do not do that to your friends. If no one's told you yet, you don't. But believe people when they talk about when they're offended, when they feel oppressed, when they think that something has gone too far, what they think is inappropriate. Not literally, but take mental note of how people's thoughts and experiences differ from yours. Even if you went through the same exact event as someone else, listen to their account of things. Notice how their perspective is different, and then you can make different characters in your world where they think differently about the same stuff happening. Definitely my favorite example of this in a movie is Star Wars The Last Jedi, where you're watching Finn and you're waiting for him to get back to Rey, but then all of a sudden Rose shatters your idea of what the movie has been all along, and she kisses Finn, and you're like, oh, Rose has her own perspective on all of these events. She thinks she's on a magical adventure, which she kind of is, and it's ended in her romance and saving her love interest, which is an amazing way to recontextualize the movie from what you thought it would be to what it is now. At least part of what it is. Star Wars is a multifaceted event now, or at least in the movie of The Last Jedi. An example from my real life would be there was a discussion on police brutality and on Black Lives Matter at my local library. They showed a movie, and then after the movie there was a Q&A. And at that event, there was a lot of people that I don't normally see at town events. Particularly, there was a lot of the African American community. And it was interesting after the movie to hear what they thought about the movie and hear their thoughts on it. And they were not all burn down the store, riot, or anything like that. It's a little bit different than what I expected going in, and the hard line that I probably would have taken with the movie. I didn't look up what that movie was. And the discussion went a whole lot differently than it would if the discussion was literally online. People were concerned about education. They were concerned about getting more representation on the police force and on our city council. They were concerned that Cedar Rapids, Iowa doesn't really have a black community and how everyone's a little bit isolated and scattered all over the town. There's a lot more political force to be had with a group if they're tied and they're able to communicate together. Upon reflection, I'm kind of disappointed people didn't take down emails to be part of a chain and actually could organize together. There probably should have been some kind of organization. If you've seen my other videos, you'll realize I'm basically telling you to empathize with people. And if you haven't seen my other videos, I have a whole series on the road to empathy, how to empathize with people, and here's a playlist now for that. I'm not going to say too much more on the subject because it is well-worn ground. And also fantastic ground, go. But wait, don't go, because do watch the rest of this video first, so take note of that. I don't know. For the meantime, believing things that minorities and people you don't know complain about and have a problem with is a good start. The next important step to writing something like Sorry to Bother You is Marxist analysis. Marx is a boogeyman and people are like, don't touch it, but Marx had a lot of very accurate observations about how capitalism works, and capitalism is the system that we are in the entire world. So you can understand a lot of what capitalism is doing and a lot of what country relations do and are for if you understand a Marxist analysis. Marx was like 200 years ago, and there have been other thinkers, and also thinkers about economic systems before Marx that informed him. This is the past. This is my past box. So there have been other big thinkers such as Kropotkin. There have been very recent books like Capitalist Realism that talks about our capitalistic system. Oh, by Zero Books. That was the publisher. So I'm just going to go through some concepts. So I'm going to go through some Marxist concepts and talk about how they apply to the movie and how they're applicable to reality. First is labor value. Marx thought that the products that exist only have value because a worker worked on them. A tree out in the middle of nowhere has no value because it has no use. A worker has to cut down that tree. Another worker has to sand that tree and cut it into boards. And a third worker has to put that board into a house or a chair or a product. And then it is useful and has value. Now, the labor generated from that worker is the value of the chair. But the price that that chair, board, cut tree are sold for are greater than the value given to that customer. The difference there is called the excess labor value, and that is what goes to the owners of industry, the bosses, the capital. It is also known as profit, but in this way, the boss or the salesman or the capitalist that has taken the excess labor value can get more value than any of the laborers that actually made the thing or are actually paying. And in this way, by doing nothing, the capitalist has gotten much richer than any worker could get on their own. And this is called labor theft, or theft of labor value. There's a nod for this in Sorry to Bother You when the millionaire says, I make the profits, and then he corrects himself and says, the workers make the profits, but I get the profits. No capitalist or CEO thinks that way, though this also illustrates class struggle. The capitalist, the boss, wants to steal more and more from the worker, and the worker wants to get paid more and more for their labor. And the things that these two people do to get over each other is class struggle. And in our current day, without a Marxist analysis, the capitalist has gotten a lot stronger in this, and has made ways that the worker is able to struggle for more of their value or to withhold their labor value have become taboo and impolite and terrible by culture, and it's because it was designed that way by capitalists. The culture was influenced and given toxic ideas that make the worker less strong and less powerful and more of a slave to the capitalist. There are people on the middle ground that say we need unions and that we can make the system better, but the capitalists will always strive to change the system in their favor and will always strive to be a higher class and to enforce their class. So as long as the capitalists exist in their class, there will be this class struggle. Whereas the worker can always exist and doesn't have to struggle if they just work, making the hierarchy of the bosses telling you what to do and then getting the profit unnecessary. One of the ways that capitalists use to make it so that workers can't fight to be better compensated is isolation. All of these things are actually logical, rational steps from the capitalist perspective, in order to make it so that people can't collectively ask for more because the workers in number have power. This is why strikes work. This is why unions made so many advances in rights in the past. Because together, people can make change. And there's a lot more workers than there are executives and millionaires. And billionaires. They're billionaires. But if you can make a worker isolated, if you can say, you can have more money than the rest of these guys if you don't help them, if you say you can have these benefits but they're not very good benefits, but all of the rest of the employees don't get benefits, then that makes one worker feel isolated, and they're more susceptible to being outnumbered and being convinced to not join the union. And you can even make unions a dirty word. So much so that a lot of people I know literally spit. They would rather be poor or homeless than to have to join a union in order to bargain for better pay. And this is the result of years of propaganda against unions and collectivism and collective bargaining. Collectivism. The idea that everything that exists because of workers in the past, and every advance only happens because of a team of workers making things better, is Kropotkin's. For example, light bulbs belong to everyone because somebody before the light bulb was invented filament, someone invented glass tubes, someone invented glass blowing, someone invented vacuum tubes. And actually, it was a team that made the light bulb and made it work. Edison wasn't working alone and also stole a lot of ideas. But also, a lot of those ideas are based off of work from the past. You don't have materials to build things with without miners. This is also why I'm less impressed with Elon Musk making all of his patents public, because they're not his patents. Teams of engineers and designers based their research off previous research and previous patents and designs to make those patents that he now made public, and for years was getting personally rich off. But it belongs to the workers, and it was made by the workers of the past. Elon Musk did some work himself, but he did not do all of it. He's not able to claim more value of it than any other worker, ideally. Thus, it is theft. And also thus, it wasn't really his to give away in the first place. This is Kropotkin's idea. Things belong to everyone. So once you have a good idea of what all of these things mean, and I suggest you take more than just this video for learning about Marxist thought, watch the system at work. Watch people be isolated. Watch people reinforce propaganda to each other. Watch how the systems move and work to benefit the companies and the capitalists more than work. This includes elected judges, appointed officials, how law cases are ruled, how many people on the Supreme Court seem to always favor a company as opposed to an individual. My favorite would be Judge Gorsuch, was an outlier judge who ruled on a case of a trucker freezing to death and he was running out of gas. It was taking hours for help to get to him. So he unhitched his truck and was able to go to the next town and save his life and not die. And he was fired for saving his own life. Gorsuch ruled that the firing was fine because he was driving someone else's property, and not doing what they tell you to means they can fire you. And Gorsuch completely overlooked the right to life. You don't have to die to serve a stupid shit corporation. You, Gorsuch. But no, that's how the system works. See who favors corporations' rights over workers' rights or individuals' rights. You can see the gears turning and the strings being pulled if you know about Marx's theories of how workers rule, about how capitalists make the system into something where they can succeed better and where they can fight against the workers. It's no coincidence that Gorsuch did that terrible thing. That Gorsuch said that people should die in service of their jobs for corporations, and now has been elevated to the Supreme Court. Companies like a judge like that who rules in their favor. And companies tell politicians what to do, and those politicians do it. Sometimes they full on take a letter from a company and just make it into law. That has happened. You can see how society is run off a system, not a literal computer system, though those are just as long and boring as what you are currently trying to understand, which I believe is why people don't understand it, and why you need to write a good story. Our system is a bunch of non-computers. Its laws, its desires, and its goals instilled in us by propaganda, by what we were taught, and by what the law allows, and by what has worked before in our system that, to put it charitably, profits people who steal and lie and use underhanded techniques and tell truck drivers that they should die in order to make sure that their products are safe. Then go back to people's complaints and see how those complaints are generated by a system that doesn't care about them. How the things they're complaining about benefit a millionaire, or at least don't inconvenience them. But don't to their face tell them that their complaint exists because it benefits a company, because that just might piss them off in some ways. Be respectful. Understand where people. So the real insidious kind of secret to this whole thing is you don't have to consciously try to put these concepts into your writing once you understand them. They naturally come out as you understand the world and the things you do. Every piece of art is political. In fact, everything is political. The ham sandwich you eat was made by subsidies to the wheat and pork industry. You're eating it now because of advertisements and government-run research into what is healthy for people to eat, and also tradition and what traditions have been brought forward to the past because they were dear to a certain group of people who had political power. There are systems and laws for who gets the name stars, and they are sold to people. Everything is political, and more so, every piece of art says something political. It might be a wishy-washy something, it might be a things are good as they are something, but that is still a powerful message to have in your art, and it is very political.
I tried to change it, I tried to stop it, but it's just right in front of their faces.
Most people that saw you on that screen knew calling their congressman wasn't going to do shit. If you get shown a problem but have no idea how to control it, then you just decide to get used to the problem.
Yeah, that's why.
Something might have an innocent seeming moral, like freedom is good, but who is free? What kind of freedom? Who are they fighting against with that freedom? Or what is imposing itself on that freedom in that story? Every work of art is made by a person in society who's affected by that society and has their thoughts soaked in that society, and their awareness will see what they want to say with that piece of art, even bad art. And then any piece of art can also be interpreted through a Marxist lens of what it says about these things. What class does it support? What kind of people are aspirational in this art? Who is portrayed as normal? And you will write these kind of things too. The thing to be doing right now and to be doing all along is to write. You can reproduce the systems you've seen, you can find the story and the narrative and the drama in the world, you can take well-worn concepts, like we have 1 million cop shows in America, and you can take those through a Marxist lens and analyze who's saying what, and you can write your own cop story mindful of these things. I would do this a lot more, but I'm pretty sure the audience that watches hour-long cop shows and the audience that watches YouTube videos are not the same. I don't think these people are looking for YouTube videos to watch. Interact with familiar narratives and see what social, political things come from the stories you've already written and how you can strengthen those and make them clear on later drafts. See, everything we do has subtext and meaning to it, especially when you view it through a lens of politics and a Marxist interpretation of things. So you can go back to older stories you have, older stories that were perfectly fine and good, and you can see the layers and the strings and the gears of society and politics and how they're working into that piece of work that you've made. And you can just make them clearer, stronger, and tie them to your themes of what you're trying to say. But most important, the artist's job is not to succumb to despair, but to find an antidote to the emptiness of existence. This was said by a character playing Gertrude Stein. I don't think she actually said it. I'm pretty sure that quote is from Woody Allen. But ignoring that, they're good words. When you write something like Sorry to Bother You, it's important not to despair and not to go nihilist and not to think that things don't matter. Because they do. You matter to your parents or your family or your friends, and they matter to you. This is getting really personal, but if no one matters to you and you don't think anyone matters, you can start being a better person immediately. You need another video. Step 1, matter to someone and find someone who matters to you, you psychopath. The best thing about Sorry to Bother You in my mind is how it is not a pessimistic movie. There are millionaires with lots of power that sell bombs. There's this magic power to sell stuff with your white voice, and no one has actually attained that comfort in their life to be the white voice, to be the interpretation of white voice, the American dream. The movie doesn't despair, it gives you the antidote. The high school football team, even though they move furniture and play football all day and don't do anything lasting in the idea of capital or art, they're still friends, they hang out, and the movie points this out to you. Your loved ones, your... Sorry, the cat's playing. I love you, cat. Personal relationships are the antidote to the chaos and the nihilism. People matter, and the movie keeps that in mind, and when people work together, things change. And the movie does two things at the same time in its ending that I love. I've talked about this before, that if you want there to be a lasting effect on the audience, the protagonist has to lose. How the catharsis of the main character winning a victory makes the audience feel satisfied and not like they need to change something in the world. If the main character accomplishes the thing, then racism is defeated and we don't need to do anything in this current world. And that also plays into the politics of art. So Sorry to Bother You does have that ending where the main characters accomplish something, but they also take it away. In a sense, spoil the ending by having Cassius have the activator happen, and he's a horse person now. And that goes to show us that our fight must go on. The millionaires still exist. As long as the millionaires exist, we will have a fight on our hands, and we have to fight. And there is no living peaceably with them. Because rationally, they go until we're horse people with no value and no money and no political will.